The Sudanese Media Center was given the opportunity to interview the U.S. Charge d'Affaires, Mr. Stephen Kotsis, at the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum. We thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for this opportunity. Let us begin about asking you about the role the U.S. Embassy played in the recent shift in relations and the policy change between the U.S. and Sudan. Especially that last May, the Charge d'Affaires before you, he had said that he had criticized the U.S. administration's policy towards Sudan.
The previous Charge d'Affaires criticized our policy? I doubt that. But in any event, well, welcome to the embassy. I'm happy to have you here. The engagement that has happened since June of last year began between the U.S. government and the Sudanese government. The role that the embassy played was an interlocutor between our two governments. We had a series of meetings held between the Sudanese side and the U.S. side. And on the U.S. side, there was a mixture of people coming from Washington as well as people from the embassy, including myself, to discuss the progress of the discussions towards lifting the sanctions. I think the predecessor was signaling that we wanted to seek a new approach to the sanctions, but I doubt he criticized them.
Do you feel that Sudan has really made enough progress to have these restrictions lifted, especially that there are so many Western entities that are criticizing this U.S. move? What is your opinion, and what do you say to them?
I've seen some criticism, and I've seen a lot of support for it as well. We have always said that lifting of the sanctions should be the result of Sudan being at peace with itself and with its neighbors. When Minister Gondor asked our government through our Secretary of State what that precisely would mean, we devised a plan of action to bring to that result as best we could. And we realized that that given the timetable of the U.S. government, that a 6-month period would be required to see that through. We gave them certain conditions that we would like to meet in order to lift the sanctions, and in fact they made great progress in all 5 areas that we asked them for improvement. Is it enough? Obviously not. It's for that reason that we are the lifting of the sanctions designed to allow for a 6-month review period beginning now, and annual reviews following that. But we're confident that the government of Sudan has understood that the main way to return to the family of nations is to bring peace to itself.
Okay, a lot can happen in 6 months. There are some worries that with the new president-elect, he might change these policies or might not be in the same line as President Obama. What do you say to that?
Of course, the new administration will have the legal authority to do what it wants. I mean, it can make it more restrictive, but they can also take this as a stepping stone for further normalization of our relations. This is something I can't speak to yet, but I can say a lot will depend on how the government of Sudan continues in the next few months. If they continue on the path that they have put themselves, I think they will get a favorable view from the new administration.
Okay. How fast will this executive order be rolled out into laws and regulations in the U.S.? What kind of cooperation do you see happening in the near future?
The actual lifting of sanctions, in fact, are lifted as of today. It's done through what's called a general license that the Treasury Department has issued. The executive order that the President Obama issued will revoke the 2 executive orders that are the foundation of this general license in 6 months, which will make it basically permanent. But in reality, there's no real difference in effect between now and 6 months. So over the last 20 years, the levels and layers of sanctions on Sudan over various laws have been very complicated, of course, and they stretch across many different acts of Congress and many different executive actions. So they have to be unwound one by one, obviously, and that takes some time.
Okay, so because the decision is kind of sudden for the Sudanese businessmen and investors, they're not really sure how to navigate themselves around it. So how will the U.S. during the next 6 months assist the Sudanese government and businessmen in adapting to these changes?
Yes, we have lifted the legal impediments for these businesses, but obviously businesses have to make business decisions based on their own risks and their own gains. What we can do, and what the executive order now allows us to do, is to both talk to businesses and trades and to encourage exports from the United States to Sudan. And we will continue, as we have in the past, explain to banks what is permissible under the law. But again, in the end, it's up to banks and businesses to determine their own risks and their own business plans.
Sudan is a very resource-rich country with a very good strategic location and many untapped opportunities in investment in agriculture and that. What is the U.S. interested to invest in Sudan?
That is obviously something that the U.S. businesses have to decide. You know, the U.S. government and the U.S. economy is not a statist system that you see in other countries, and it's not centralized as you see in other countries. All we can do is encourage business investment, and it will be up to the businesses to decide how they want to invest. But I think the areas that you talked about are really areas that not only U.S. businesses but other businesses would want to look at and invest in.
All right, let's go back to the decision itself. Did any regional countries play a role in the U.S. decision to lift this exemption?
Obviously, over the last several years, we've talked with other countries, and other countries have encouraged us to review our sanctions policy. But the decision to move forward with Sudan to lift sanctions over the course of this engagement was strictly a bilateral one.
Okay. There's a recent and very significant shift of allegiances in the region. Sudan is already cooperating with China, with Russia, and now with the U.S. Will there be any competition or rivalries in this country regarding these three countries?
The issue of China, Russia, and the United States in Africa is a very complicated one, obviously, and it plays out in different ways in different countries in Africa. But the bottom line is, as long as everyone plays by the rules, and as long as everyone follows international norms in business and in other actions, those kinds of competition can be helpful.
Sudan is trying to distance itself from the conflict in South Sudan and Libya, but what is the U.S. expecting from Sudan there? How do you view Sudan's role?
I would not characterize it as distancing themselves. In fact, we are encouraging them to engage in both these issues. But what we're expecting is that they engage in a multilateral sense, that not to make decisions based solely on its own interests. Sudan has done that in South Sudan by working through IGAD, the International Governmental Authority on Development, and also in Libya through multilateral discussions. So what we count on Sudan to continue to doing, as it's been doing now, is to work in a multilateral way to ensure that there's peace in South Sudan and Libya.
Okay, Sudan, the intelligence here has been cooperating with CIA. Do we see further cooperation in the region, in Africa, maybe with AFRICOM, or something maybe on the ground?
Our cooperation with the intelligence here has been primarily on counterterrorism, and I expect that to continue quite a bit. The cooperation with AFRICOM is hindered somewhat because our laws still do not allow us to provide for military sales and military assistance. But I think intelligence cooperation through the different security services can and must continue.
Okay. There's agreements between the U.S. and Washington regarding the peace process in the two areas in Darfur. What will Washington say to the armed groups that reject peace, especially now?
Ambassador Booth, the special envoy, is actually in Paris right now trying to work with the members of the Sudan Call and others to try to finalize an agreement on the roadmap of the AUHIP, especially on a cessation of hostilities agreement for the two areas in Darfur. We hope that he succeeds. But if he doesn't, we will continue to press the opposition to adhere to the roadmap, as well as the government, by the way.
So the government is adhering to the roadmap. We have announced a cessation of hostilities, but there are some fears that the rebel groups will try to break the ceasefire or try to undermine the government's efforts in that. How will the U.S. support Sudan in trying to make sure that that doesn't happen?
We appreciate the fact that over the last 6 months, the government of Sudan has not made any offensive operations, and that any military activity that has occurred has been limited. We will continue to counsel restraint on the side of the government to ensure that any attacks are responded to in self-defense only and not large retaliations. And we will continue to push the opposition again to choose the path of peace.
Okay. So the U.S. is cooperating and has been for a long time with Sudan in the fight against terrorism. And Sudan has been exerting many efforts in this regard. It's positioned itself as a reliable ally in the fight against terrorism. But despite these efforts, Sudan remains on the state-sponsoring list of terrorism. Do we foresee it being removed? And does that in any way hinder the Sudan cooperation with the U.S. in that, being on the list?
Being on the list is being placed on the list and taken off the list is governed by statutes. So the process to be removed from the list is a statutory effort. And of course, since we're in the last 3 days of the Obama administration, I don't foresee something happening this week. So I think this is something that we'll engage with the Sudanese. I think Minister Gondor has already expressed his desire for Sudan to be removed from the list, and we will work with them to ensure that the conditions can be made for them to be removed from the list. But I just want to stress, this is not a purely political decision based on a whim or a decision for the moment. It's based on statutory requirements, and they have to be met.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about education. What do we see kind of cooperation, education, and also cultural cooperation? What do you foresee happening?
Because of all the sanctions, there are still limitations on what we can do for developmental assistance. That said, we can do some cultural cooperation, and we already have a robust program to try to strengthen academic exchanges with the United States. And this embassy, well before my arrival, has done a wonderful job on doing that, and we'll try to find other ways to strengthen our cultural ties. And education and other developmental assistance, we're going to have to work with USAID here to try to engage that more. We do have some educational programs, but they're very small.
Are there any plans for the U.S. Helping with the humanitarian assistance in the two areas and in Darfur? There's some talk that the U.S. has, or maybe some rumors that the U.S. has suggested to assist in some way.
That's more than rumors. We have suggested that. It seems to be the main stumbling block for a cessation of hostilities agreement is a path towards providing humanitarian assistance to the two areas, and this is what blocked progress in August and the final signing of an agreement in August. And we've been working since August to try to bring the two sides closer together. The SPLMN are insisting that some of the assistance go across border from a neighboring country. Their view is that they cannot count on the government of Sudan to fulfill its commitments on any agreement on providing humanitarian assistance. The government, on its part, is concerned of opening a border would allow for the trafficking of other goods and would make it more difficult for them to stop flow of weapons and other things. So we have to, on the bottom line, get the two sides to feel more confident that each other's needs. The United States, what the United States has done is propose a way that the United States can be an actor in assuring that these flows continue, and that they won't be stopped by the government, and so we have reached we're trying to reach agreement on both sides that the United States can play that role.
Okay, can you be a little bit more specific on U.S. wanting to be an actor? Exactly what do you see the U.S. doing?
Well, those actually details are being negotiated right now, but so I don't want to presume what the final outcome will look like. But the important thing to understand is that the United States is willing to take steps to assure that both sides that this humanitarian assistance will not be able to be shut off by one side or the other.
All right. I think I'm done here. Would you like to add anything?
No, I just want to say, as I've been saying for the last couple of days, I know when the sanctions were announced, it was a very complicated process for removal of sanctions, and that again is because the sanctions themselves are very complex and cover a myriad of laws. So trying to dig into the executive order and the general license and the commerce order, you can have a lot of questions, and we will receive a lot of questions. But the bottom line is that the sanctions are lifted as of today, and the lifting of sanctions is comprehensive. So I'm very happy for that.
Okay, thank you so much, Your Excellency. Thank you so much.